I dreamt that I woke up. It's the oldest dream of all, and I've just had it. I dreamt that I woke up. I was in my own bed. That seemed a bit of surprise, but, after a moment's thought, I guess it made sense. Who else's bed should I wake up in? I looked around, and I said to myself, well. Not much of a thought, I admit, still. Do we ever find the right words for the big occasions? And then, knock on the door, woman comes in, sideways and backwards at the same time. Should have looked awkward, but it didn't. No, it was all, smooth, stylish. And she was carrying this tray, which was why she'd come in like that. And then as she turned, I saw she was wearing a uniform, a sort of nurse's uniform, maybe, or a stewardess, some airline. Anyway, room service, she says, with, a bit of a smile, as if she's not used to providing it, or I wasn't used to expecting it, or both. Room service, I repeat. Where I come from, something like that only happens in films. So I sat up in bed, and I found that I didn't have any clothes on. No pajamas. This was a change. Also changed that when I sat up in bed and realized she could see me bollock naked to the waist, if you understand me. I don't know. I didn't feel embarrassed, Max. And that was good. Well, your clothes are in the cupboard, she said. Take your time. You've got all day. And she added with more of a smile, and all tomorrow as well. So I looked down on my tray. Let me tell you about that breakfast. It was the breakfast of my life, and no mistake. The grapefruit for a start. Now, you know what a grapefruit's like, right? The way it sort of spurts juice down your shirt and keeps slipping out of your hand unless you hold it down with a fork or something. The way the flesh always sticks to those opaque membranes and then suddenly comes loose with half the pith attached, the way it always tastes sour, yet, makes you feel bad about piling sugar on top of it. That's what a grapefruit's like, right? Now, let me tell you about this grapefruit. Its flesh was pink for a start, not yellow, and each segment had already been carefully freed from its clinging membrane. The fruit itself was anchored to the dish by some prong or fork through its bottom, so that I didn't even need to hold it down or touch it. I looked around for the sugar, just out of habit. The taste sort of came in two parts. One, first of all, a kind of awakening sharpness, followed quickly by a wash of sweetness. And each of those little globules, which were about, the size of tadpoles, just seemed to burst separately in my mouth. That was the grapefruit of my dreams. I don't mind telling you. Like an emperor, I pushed aside the gutted hull and then lifted a silver dome from a crested plate. And of course, I knew what would be underneath. 3 slices of grilled streaky bacon with gristle and rind removed. The crispy fat all glowing like a bonfire. 2 eggs fried. The yolk looked milky because the fat had been properly spooned over it in the cooking, and the outer edges of the white just sort of trailing off into filigree gold braid. A grilled tomato I can only describe in terms of what it wasn't. It wasn't a collapsing cup of stalks, pips, fibre, and red water. It was, something compact, sliceable, cooked equally all the way through and tasting, yes, this is the thing I remember, tasting of tomato. The sausage, again, not a tube of lukewarm horse meat stuffed into a French letter, but no. Dark, umber, and succulent sausage. That's the only word for it. All the others, the ones I thought I'd enjoyed in my previous life, were merely practicing to be like this. They'd been auditioning, and they wouldn't get the part either. And there was, a little crescent-shaped side plate with a crescent-shaped silver lid, and I raised it, and yes, there were my bacon rinds, separately grilled, waiting to be nibbled. The toast, the marmalade. Well, you can imagine those. You could dream what, you could dream yourself what those were like, but I must tell you about the teapot, okay? The tea, of course, was the real thing. Tasting as if it had been, picked by some Raj's personal, I have some of it here, some Raj's personal entourage. As for the teapot, once, years ago, I was on Paris, package holiday, and I wandered off from the others and walked around where the smart people live, where they shop and they eat. Anyway, On a corner, I passed the cafe. It didn't look particularly grand, and just for a minute, I thought of sitting down there. But I didn't, because at one of the tables, I saw a man having tea, and as he poured himself a fresh cup, I spotted a little gadget which seemed to me almost the definition of luxury. So attached to the teapot spout, dangling by 3 delicate silver chains, was a strainer. And as the man raised the pot to its pouring angle, the strainer swung outwards to catch the leaves. I couldn't believe that serious thought had once gone into the matter of how to relieve this tea-drinking gentleman of the incredible burden of picking up a normal strainer with his free hand. I walked away from the cafe feeling, self-righteous. Now, on my tray, I had a teapot bearing the insignia of some chic Parisian cafe, and a strainer was attached to its spout by 3 silver chains, and suddenly I could see the point of it. So after breakfast, I put the tray down on my bedside table, went to the cupboard, and here they all were, my favorite clothes. That sports jacket I still liked, even after people started saying how unusual, did you buy it second hand, another 20 years and it'll be back in fashion, etc., etc. That one. The pair of corduroy trousers my wife threw out because the seat was beyond repair, but someone had repaired it. And the trousers looked almost new, though, not so new that you weren't fond of them. They were worn in. My shirts held out their arms to me, and why not, as they'd never been, pampered like this in their lives before, all in ranks on velvet-covered hangers. There were shoes whose deaths I'd regretted, socks now deholed again, ties I'd seen in shop windows. It wasn't a collection of clothes you'd envy, but that wasn't the point. I was reassured I would be myself again. I would be more than myself. And then by the side of the bed, this little tasseled bell pull that I hadn't ever previously noticed. So I tug it, and felt a bit embarrassed, climbed under the sheets again. And then when the nurse stewardess came in, I sort of, slapped my stomach and said, I could eat that all over again. I'm not surprised, she replied. I was half expecting you to say so. Well, I didn't get up all day. I had breakfast for lunch, and breakfast for dinner. It seemed like a pretty good, system to me. I would worry about lunch tomorrow, or rather, maybe I wouldn't worry about lunch tomorrow. I wouldn't worry about anything tomorrow. Between my breakfast lunch and my breakfast dinner, I was beginning to appreciate that strainer system. I tell you, you can't carry eating a croissant with your free hand while you pour. Well, anyway, between those, I had a long sleep, and then I took a shower. I could have had a bath, but I seem to have spent decades in a bloody bath, so instead I took a shower. I found a quilted dressing gown with my initials and gilt cord on the breast pocket. Fitted well, but I thought, those initials were farting higher than my arsehole. I don't come here to swank around like a film star. And then, as I was staring at these golden swiggles, they disappeared from before my eyes. Blinked. Gone. Dressing gown felt more comfortable with just a normal pocket. The next day I woke up and had another breakfast. It was as good as the previous 3. Clear the problem of breakfast had now been solved. And then when Natalia came to clear the tray, she sort of murmured, "Shopping? Of course." It was exactly what had been on my mind. "Do you want to go shopping or stay shopping?" "Go shopping," I said. I don't really understand the difference. "Sure. My wife's brother once came back from 10 days in Florida and said, 'When I die, I don't want to go to heaven. I want to go shopping in America.' So that second morning, I tell you, I began to understand what was meant by that comment. Because when we got to the supermarket, Natalia asked me if I wanted to, walk or drive, and I said, "Well, let's drive, that sounds fun." A reply which she seemed to expect. On reflection, some parts of her job must be quite boring. We probably all react much the same way, don't we? Anyway, we drove. The shopping carts are motorised wire mesh trolleys that, whiz around like dodgems, except that they never crash into one another because of some electric eye device. And just when you think you're going to have a prang, you find yourself swerving round the oncoming cart. It's fun. Trying to crash. System's very easily mastered. Anyway, you have this plastic card, you push into a slot next to the goods you want to buy, you then punch in the quantity, and after a second or two, the card is returned. Stuff then is sort of automatically delivered and credited. I should be giving this to you, Max, particularly not on camera. I had a good time in my wired cart. I remember when I used to go shopping in the old days, the previous days, I'd sometimes see small kids sitting inside a trolley as if it were a cage and being pushed around by their parents, and I'd be envious. But I wasn't anymore. And boy, did I buy some stuff that morning. I practically cleaned them out of those pink grapefruit. That's what I felt like anyway. I bought breakfast, I bought lunch, I bought dinner, I bought mid-morning snacks, afternoon teas, aperitif, munchies, midnight feasts. I bought some digestives, I bought fruit. I couldn't name vegetables I'd never seen before. Strange new cuts of meat from familiar animals and familiar looking cuts from animals I'd never eaten before. In the Australian section, I found crocodile tail steak, fillets of water buffalo, terrine de kangaroo. I bought them all. I plundered the gourmet cabinet, freeze-dried lobster souffle with cherry chip toppings. How could I resist something like that? As for the drinks, I had no idea. So many different means of intoxication ever been devised. I'm mainly a beer and spirits man myself, but I didn't want to seem prejudiced. No, Max, you've had your bit. You're not in heaven, I am. So I bought crates of wine, cocktails, the labels on the bottles. They were helpful. Detailed instructions about how drunk, the contents would make you, taking into consideration factors like sex, weight, body fat. Anyway, there was one brand of transparent alcohol with a very scruffy label, and it was called Stinko Paralytico, made in Yugoslavia. And it said on it, this bottle will make you drunker than you've ever been before. Well, I had to take a case of that home, didn't I? And it was a good morning's work, yeah. It might have been the best morning's work there ever was. And don't look down your nose at me, by the way. You'd have done much the same, I believe. Okay, say you didn't go shopping. What would you have done instead? Met some famous people, had sex, played golf. There aren't an infinite number of possibilities. That's one of the points to remember about it, this place and that place. If I went shopping first, well, that's what people like me would do. I'm not looking down my nose. If you'd have met famous people first, or had sex first, or played golf first. Anyway, I got round to that in all due course. As I say, they're not so very different. Why am I eating biscuits when I should be really drinking tea? What are we drinking today? So, this is the tea, which, Jingmai White. Autumn 2021, incredible. When you have an infinite supply of it, there's, you could be saying, well, what's the point of weighing? But, I don't know. Old habits die hard, we say. When we got home, I was, not exactly tired. You don't get tired, just kind of sated. The shopping carts were fun, though. I didn't think I'd ever bother to walk again. In fact, come to think of it, I didn't see anyone walk at the supermarket. And then it was lunchtime, and Natalia arrived with breakfast. And afterwards, I took a nap. And I expected a dream, because I didn't, I always dream if I go to sleep in the afternoon, but I didn't. Surprise, surprise. I wondered why not. Natalia woke me with tea and the biscuits I'd chosen, and they were currant biscuits, not these, especially designed for people like me.
Now, I don't know where you stand on this one, but all my life, it's been a matter of complaint that they don't put enough currants in the currant biscuits. And obviously, you don't want too many currants in a biscuit, otherwise you'd have to, just a wodge of currants rather than a biscuit. But I've always believed that the proportion of ingredients, could be adjusted upwards in favour of the currants, naturally. 50-50, something like that. In fact, those the ones, that's what they were called. I think they were called 50-50s. Anyway, I bought 3,000 packets of them, opened the newspaper, which Natalia had, thoughtfully placed on the tray, and I almost spilt my tea, my Jing-Mai tea. No, well, I didn't. But there it was, front page news. Well, it would have been, wouldn't it? Leicester City had won the FA Cup. No kidding. Leicester City had bloody well won the FA Cup. You wouldn't have believed it, would you? Mm. Well, maybe you would if you didn't know didn't know anything about football. But I know a thing or two about football, and I've supported Leicester City all my life, and I wouldn't have believed it. That's the point. Don't get me wrong. I'm not running my team down. They're a very good team, sometimes. Yet they never seem to win. The big ones, second division champions. As many times as you like to count. Oh yes, but they've never won the first division. Runners-up once, sure, no problem. And as for the cup, it's a fact, an undeniable fact that in all the times that I have supported Leicester City, and for all the time before that too, they have never won the FA Cup. They've had a very good post-war record in reaching the final, just as good as not capturing the trophy, 1949, 1961, 1963, 1969. Those are the black years, and the one or two, of those defeats were, in my opinion, particularly unlucky. Indeed, I would single out. Anyway, okay, I can see you're not interested in football. It doesn't matter. As long as you grasp the central fact that Leicester City had never won anything but peanuts before, and now they had secured the FA Cup for the first time in the club's history. And the match was a real thriller too, according to newspaper. City won 5-4 in extra time after coming from behind on no fewer than 4 occasions. What a performance! What a blend of skill and sheer character. I was proud of the lads. And Natalia would get me the video tomorrow. I was sure she could. Anyway, in the meantime, I took a little champagne with the breakfast that I had for dinner. Newspapers were great. In a way, it's the newspapers I remember best. Leicester City won the FA Cup, as I may have mentioned. They found a cure for cancer. My party won the general election every single time until everyone saw that its ideas were, basically right. And not right, but, right. And most of the opposition came over and joined us. Little old ladies got rich on the pools every week. Sex offenders repented and were released back into society and led blameless lives. Airline pilots learned how to save planes from mid-air collisions. Everyone got rid of nuclear weapons. England manager chose the whole Leicester City team en bloc to represent England in the World Cup, and they came up, they came back with the Jules Rimet trophy, memorably beating Brazil 4-1 in the final. Israel, Palestine, that was all sorted out. Putin, everything. And when you read the newspapers, the newsprint didn't come off on your hands, stories didn't come off in your mind, children were innocent creatures once more, men and women were nice to one another, nobody's teeth had to be filled, women's tights never laddered. What else did I do that first week? Well, as I said, played golf, had sex, met famous people, and basically didn't feel bad once. So, okay, let me start with the golf. Now, I've never been much good at the game, but I used to enjoy, hacking around a municipal course where the grass is like coconut matting and no one bothers to replace their divots because there aren't, there's so many bloody holes in the fairway that you can't work out where your divot has come from anyway. Still, I'd seen most of the famous courses on television. I was curious to play, the golf of my dreams, shall we say. And as soon as I felt the contact my driver made on that first tee and watched the ball howling off a couple of 100 yards, I knew I was in at least 7th heaven. You know, my clubs were perfectly weighted to the touch, the fairways had a nice lush springiness, held the ball up for you like a waiter with a drinks tray. And my caddy, I never had a caddy before, but, you know, he treated me like Arnold Palmer, full of useful advice, never pushy. The course seemed to have everything, streams and lakes and antique bridges, bits of seaside links like in Scotland, patches of flowering dogwood and azalea from Augusta beechwood, pine bracken and gorse. You know, it was a difficult course, but, you know, one that gave you chances. Anyway, I went round that sunny morning in 67. 67, yeah. Which was 5 under par and 20 shots better than I'd ever done on the municipal course. I was so pleased with my round that when I got back, I asked Natalia if she'd have sex with me. And she said, of course, she'd love to. And found me very attractive. And though she'd only seen, you know, the top half, she was pretty sure the rest would be in good working order too. So anyway, there were a few slight problems, like she was, you know, deeply in love with someone else, and her conditions of work stated that employees were fired for having sexual relations with new arrivals. And she, you know, had a slight heart condition, which meant that any extra strain could be a bit dangerous. But, you know, if I gave her a couple of minutes, she'd slip off and get into some sexy underwear right away. Well, I obviously debated with myself for a while about, you know, the rights and wrongs of what I'd been proposing. And when she came back, all, you know, perfume and cleavage, well, I told her that, on balance, I thought we probably shouldn't go ahead. She was a bit disappointed, and you know, sat down opposite me, crossed her legs, which was a pretty sight, I can tell you. But I was adamant. It was only later, the next morning, in fact, that I realized she had maybe been turning me down. You know, I'd never been turned down in such a nice way before. You know, they even make the bad things a good thing here, right? So I had a magnum of champagne with my sturgeon and chips that night. You don't get hangovers either. And slipping off to sleep with the memory of that crafty backspin that I'd achieved with my wedge at the 16th to hold the ball on the upper level of the two-tier green. When anyway, I felt the covers of the bed being lifted, and at first I thought it was Natalia, and felt a bit, you know, bad with her heart condition and losing a job and, you know, being in love with someone else, etc., etc. But when I put my arm around her and whispered, "Natalia," a voice whispered back, "No, it is not Natalia." And the accent was different, all husky and foreign, and then other things made me realize it was not Natalia. You know, attractive lady in many ways, though Natalia was. Anyway, what happened next, and by next I do not imply a brief period of time, is, well, you know, hard to describe. The best I can do is say that in the morning I had gone round in 67, which is, you know, 5 under par and 20 shots ahead of my previous best. And what followed that night was, you know, comparable achievement, perhaps. I am, you understand, reluctant to criticize my dear wife in this department. It's just that after some years, you know, and the kids and being tired, well, you can't help, you know, dragging one another down a little bit. It's still nice, but, you know, you sort of do what's necessary, don't you? What I hadn't realized was that if a couple can drag one another down, another couple can, whoa, drag one another up. Whoa. I didn't know I could. I mean, I didn't know anyone could. Each of us seemed to, I don't know instinctively what the other one wanted. I'd never really come across that before. Not, you understand, that I wish to sound as if I'm criticizing my dear wife. I expected to wake up feeling tired, but again, it was more that sense of being pleasantly full, sated, like after shopping. Had I dreamt what had happened? No, there were 2 long red hairs on my pillow to confirm the reality. Their colour also proved that my visitor had definitely not been Natalia. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, with a bit of a cheeky smile as she brought my breakfast. It was altogether a good day, I replied, perhaps a bit, I don't know, pompously, because I sort of guessed she knew. "Except," I added quickly, "for hearing about your heart condition. I'm really sorry about that." "Oh, I'll muddle through," she said. "The engine's good for another few thousand years." So we went shopping. I wasn't yet so lazy, you know, I wanted to stay shopping. I read the newspaper, had lunch, played golf, tried to catch up on some reading with one of those Dickens videos, I think, that I watched. Had sturgeon and chips, turned out the lights, and not long afterwards had sex. You know, it was a good way to spend the day. Almost perfect, it seemed to me. And I'd gone round in 67 again. If only I hadn't driven into the dogwoods on the 18th. I think it was just too pumped up. I could have marked a 66 or even a 65 on my card. And so life continued, as the saying goes, for months, certainly maybe longer. The one thing they haven't yet fixed, of course, is that the lighting. Sometimes that's the one thing they... I'll get some different lighting and then we can continue. Lighting. Did you see what happened there? As soon as I had that thought, well, first of all, the light technicians immediately were like, oh, well, fuck you, and they just took it down another few notches. But also, suddenly, and then there was light, thanks to Natalia. Natalia brought the light. Natalia always brings the light. And some incense, which I didn't even know I needed until Natalia brought it, because Natalia always brings the light, and Natalia always brings that which we need. Anyway, where was I? Make some more tea. Anyway, so life continued, as the saying goes, for months, certainly, maybe longer. After a while, you seem to sort of just stop looking at the date on the newspaper. And I realized it'd been the right decision not to have sex with Natalia. Yeah, because we were then finally able to become good friends, which we, as you know, hadn't been before. So anyway, one day I say, well, what happens when my wife arrives, my dear wife? And she said, oh, yeah, I thought you might be worrying about that. Oh, no, I'm not worrying, I said, referring to my nightly visitor, because the whole thing was, a bit like being like a businessman on a foreign trip, I suppose. Sort of, generally. So anyway, I said, will she mind? I said, this time referring to the visitor, will she know? I think there are going to be problems, I said, once again, talking more generally. Hello. And this is where the problems are solved, she replied. So I said, okay, well, if you say so. And I was beginning kind of to get convinced that, it might all sort of turn out okay, right? For instance, I'd always had this dream. Well, I don't mean dream exactly. I mean, I don't know, something I wanted a lot. A dream of being judged. No, that doesn't sound right. It sounds like I want to have my head chopped off by a guillotine or, whipped or something. No, it's not like that. No, I wanted to be judged. Do you see? It's what we all want, isn't it? I wanted, some kind of summing up. I wanted my life looked at. I mean, we don't get that, not unless we appear in court or given over, to a psychiatrist or something, neither of which had come my way. And I wasn't exactly disappointed, seeing I wasn't, a criminal, nutter. I'm a normal person. And I just wanted what a lot of normal people want. I wanted my life looked at. Do you see? And so I began to explain this one day to my now dear friend Natalia, not being sure I could put it, any better than the above. But of course, she immediately understood. She said it was a very popular request. It wouldn't be hard to fix. So a couple of days later, I go along, and I asked her to come with me for moral support, and she agreed. And it was just what I expected at first. There was this fancy old building with columns, lots of words in Latin, Greek, or something, carved along the top, flunkies in uniform, which, made me glad I'd insisted on a new suit for the occasion. Inside there was a huge staircase, one of those that divides in two and does a big circle in opposite directions, and then it meets itself again. Oh, I forgot, the incense it never goes out, you can't ever put it out. And there were marbles everywhere and freshly polished brass and great, stretches of mahogany that you knew would never get woodworm. It wasn't a huge room, but that didn't matter. More to the point, it had the right sort of feel, formal but not too off-putting. It was almost cozy with bits of old velvet looking rather tatty. Except that serious things had happened here. And he was a nice old gent, the one who did me, a bit like my dad. More like an uncle, I'd say, maybe. Friendly eyes, looked you straight in the face, you could tell. He stood no nonsense. He'd read all my papers, he said, and they were at his elbow, history of my life, everything I'd done and thought and said and felt, the whole bloody caboodle, the good bits, the bad, made quite a pile, as you'd imagine. I wasn't sure I was allowed to address him, but anyway, I did. I said, okay, well, you're a quick reader, and no mistake. And he said he'd had, lots of training, and we had a bit of a laugh at that, and then he took a squint at his watch. No, actually he did it quite politely, and he asked me if I wanted my verdict. And I found myself sort of squaring my shoulders and putting my hands into fists at my side with thumbs down the trouser seams, and then I nodded and said, yes, sir. Fuck. Felt a bit nervous. I don't mind telling you, right? And he said I was okay. I'm not kidding. That's exactly what he said. He said, you're okay. I sort of waited for him to go on, but he just dropped his eyes. And I could see his hand moving to the top document on another file, and then he looked up and he gave a little smile. He said, no, really, you're... He sort of did that. You're okay. So I nodded again, and this time, he really was going back to his work. So I turned and left, and then when we got out, I confessed to Natalia that, I'd been a bit disappointed. And she said most people were, but I wasn't to take it as any reflection on me, so, I suppose I didn't. And it was about this time that I took to meeting famous people. First I was a bit shy and only asked, for film stars and sports folk. Who do I meet? I met Steve McQueen and Judy Garland and John Wayne and Jay-Z and Beyonce and Taylor, obviously. And I met, Eddie Murphy, and I met Stevie Wonder, and I met, oh my God, so many people, so many amazing people. Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas, they were cool. And I met various popes. I met Winston Churchill, Mao Tse, Lao Tzu, Shakespeare, Buddy Holly, Marx, Lenin. I don't really want to meet McCartney. Most of them were very nice on the whole. Sort of, natural. Not at all grand or condescending. They were like real people. I asked to meet Jesus Christ, but they said they weren't sure about that, so I didn't push it. I met Noah, but not surprisingly, it was a bit of a language problem. Some people I just want to look at. Hitler, for instance. Now, there's a man I wouldn't really shake the hands off, but they arranged that I could hide behind some bushes while he walked past in his nasty little uniform, large as life. Guess what happened next? Well, I started worrying. And I worried about the most ridiculous things, like my health, for instance. Isn't that crazy? Maybe it was something to do with Natalia telling me about, her heart condition, but I suddenly began to imagine things going wrong with me. I came over all fatty, diet conscious. I got a rowing machine, exercise bicycle. I worked out with weights, kept off salt and sugar, animal fats, cream cakes. Not tea. Tea's good for you. And I even cut down on my intake of, 50-50s to half a packet a day. Seriously, I ate that packet yesterday. I also had spells of, worrying about my hairline, my supermarket driving, were the trolleys safe, my sexual performance, my bank balance. Why was I worrying about my bank balance when I didn't even have a bank? I imagined, my card not working at the supermarket. I felt guilty at the amount of credit I seemed to be given. What had I done to deserve it? Heaven, as it were. Most of the time, of course, I was fine with the shopping, the golf, the sex, meeting the famous people, but every so often I would think, what if I can't make it around the 18 holes? You know, like, what if I can't really afford my 50-50s? Finally, I confessed these thoughts to Natalia, obviously. And she thought I should be passed on to someone else. Natalia's work was done. She said, you know, I felt sad. I asked, well, you know, could I buy her something to show her my gratitude? She said she had everything she needed. I tried writing a poem because, you know, Natalia rhymes with sweetener. But after that, I couldn't really make it get anything better than that, so I sort of gave up. And in any case, I thought, you know, she'd probably been given poems like that before. You know, Margaret was to look after me next. She looked more serious than Natalia, you know, all smart suits, not a hair out of place. Sort of person who's a finalist in those Business Women of the Year competitions. I was a bit scared of her. I certainly couldn't imagine myself suggesting sex like I did to Natalia, and I half expected her to disapprove of the way of life I'd been leading. But she didn't, of course. No, she just said that she assumed I was pretty familiar by now with the amenities and that she would be there if I needed more than mere practical assistance. Tell me something, I asked her on our first meeting when we were drinking teas, just here. She said, you know, it's silly to be worrying about my health, isn't it? Isn't it? Quite unnecessary. It's silly to worry about money, right? Quite unnecessary, she says. Something in her tone implied that, you know, if I cared to look, I could probably find things that were worth worrying about. I didn't pursue this. I suppose, I don't know, plenty of time ahead of me. Time was something I would never be short of, it seemed. Now, I'm probably not the quickest thinker in the world, and in my previous life I tended to just, you know, get on with the things I had to do or wanted to do and not brood too much about them. That's normal, isn't it? But give anyone enough time and they will get somewhere with their fucking thoughts and start asking a few of the bigger questions. For instance, who actually ran this place? And why had I seen so little of them? You know, I had assumed there might be some sort of entrance examination, or, oh yes, there are babies here as well. Yeah, obviously. Or perhaps continual assessment, not happy babies. But I said, you know, I don't know. I didn't understand it. Who ran this place? You know, they let me bunk off every day, improve my golf. Was I allowed to take everything for granted? Was there no morality in heaven? Did they expect something from me? And there was, you know, the Hitler business, you know, wait behind a bush, and he strolled past, stocky figure, nasty uniform, with a false smile on his face. Fair enough. I'd seen him now. My curiosity was satisfied, but, well, I had to ask myself, what was he doing here? Did he order breakfast like everybody else? Hello? I'd already observed that he was allowed to wear, you know, his own clothes. Did this mean he could also play golf? Could Hitler be having sex right now? How did this thing operate? And then there was me worrying about, you know, my health, my money, and the supermarket driving. I wasn't worrying about them in themselves anymore. I was worrying about the fact that I'd been worrying. What was all that about? Was it more than a routine adjustment problem, as Natalia had suggested? I think it was the golf that finally, I don't know, maybe turned to Margaret for some explanations. There was no doubt about it. Over the months and years, I played that lovely, lush course with its little tricks and temptations. Ooh, how many times I put the ball in the water at the short 11th, etc., etc. My game improved no end. I said as much one day to Severiano, my regular caddy. My game, Severiano, I said, has fucking improved to no end. I like to swear sometimes. And he agreed. And it was not until later, between, you know, dinner and sex, that I began to reflect on what I said. I had opened up on the course with a 67, and gradually my score was coming down. A while ago, I was shooting a regular 59, and now, under cloudless skies, I was inching down to the low 50s. I could drive 350 yards without trouble. My pitching was transformed. My putts rattled into the hole as if drawn by magnet. I could see my target score coming down through the 40s, then, I don't know, a key psychological moment, this presumably, breaking the barrier at 36, that's to say, you know, 2 strokes a hole average. And then coming down through the 20s, my game has improved no end, I thought, and repeated the words no end to myself. But that's, of course, exactly what it couldn't do. There had to be an end to my improvement, right? I mean, one day I would play a round of golf in 18 shots. I'd buy Severiano, a couple of drinks, celebrate later with sturgeon and chips and sex, and then what? Had anyone, even here, ever played a golf course in 17 shots? Can't do it. Margaret didn't, answer the tassel bell pull like Natalia. In fact, you had to, apply by some sort of video phone for an interview. Anyway, I'm worried about the golf, I began. That's not really my speciality. No, you see, when I first arrived, I shot a 67. Now I'm down to the low 50s. That doesn't sound like a problem. And I'm going to go on getting better. Congratulations. And then one day, I'll finally do the course in 18 shots. Your ambition is admirable. She sounded as if she was, making fun of me. I'm making her sound like an AI, but she was a real person. But then what do? I say. So she goes, okay, well, try going round every time in 18 shots. Doesn't work like that. Why not? It just doesn't. I'm sure there are many other courses. Same problem, I said, interrupting her a bit rudely, I guess. I said, well, Well, she says, switch to another sport. Then come back to golf when you're tired of the other one. But the problem's the same. I'd have done the course in 18 shots. Golf would be used up. End of, game over. There are lots of other sports. And they get used up too. What do you have for breakfast every morning? I'm sure she knew the answer already from the way she nodded when I told her. You see, you have the same every morning. You don't get tired of breakfast. No. Well, think about golf as you do about breakfast. Perhaps you'll never get tired of going round in 18 shots. Perhaps, I said, dubiously. It sounds to me as if you haven't ever played golf, Margaret. And anyway, that's another thing. What is? The getting tired. You don't get tired here. Is that a complaint? I don't know. Tiredness can be arranged. Sure, I replied. But I bet it'd be a sort of pleasant tiredness, right? Not one of those knackering tirednesses which just make you want to die. Don't you think you're being a little bit perverse, Steve? She was, crisp, almost impatient. What did you want? What did you hope for? I nodded to myself and, we called it a day. My life continued. That was another phrase that made me grin a little bit. My life continued and my golf improved. I did all sorts of other things. I went on several cruises. I learned canoeing, mountaineering, ballooning. I got into all sorts of danger and escaped unscathed. I explored the jungle. I watched a court case. Didn't agree with the verdict. Tried being a painter. Not as bad as I thought. A surgeon. I fell in love, of course, lots of times. Oh, God. But that, I stopped doing that. I pretended I was the last person on earth and the first. None of this meant that I stopped doing, what I'd always done, kind of. I had sex with an increasing number of women, sometimes simultaneously. I ate rarer, stranger foods, drank more and more exquisite teas. I met famous people all the way to the edges of my memory. I met every footballer there ever was. I started with the famous ones, and the ones I admired, but weren't particularly famous. And then the average ones, and then the ones whose names I remembered without sort of remembering what they even looked like or played like. And finally, I asked for the only ones, the ones I had met. The nasty, boring, violent players that I didn't admire at all. Never meet. They were just sort of nasty, boring, violent, off the pitch as on. But I didn't want to run out of footballers. And then I ran out of footballers. Jesus. I then asked to see Margaret again. I've met all the footballers, I said. I'm afraid I don't know much about football either, she says, and I don't have any dreams, I said. What would they be for, she said. What would they be for? I sensed that in that way she was testing me, seeing how serious I was. Did it all add up to more than a mere adjustment problem, ultimately? I think I'm owed an explanation, I said, a little stupidly, pompously, idiotically. Ask anything you like, she said. Okay, look, I want to get things straight. An admirable ambition, she goes, you know. She talks a little bit posh like this, right? So I thought I'd better start at the beginning. Look, this is heaven, isn't it? Oh, yes. Okay, well, what about Sundays? I don't follow you. On Sundays, I said, as far as I can work out, because I don't follow the days too closely anymore, I play golf, go shopping, eat dinner, have sex, and don't feel bad. Isn't that perfect? She asked me. I don't want to sound ungrateful, I say, but where's God? God? Do you want God? Is that what you want? Is it a question of what I want? That's exactly what it's a question of. Do you want God? I suppose I thought it wasn't that way round. I suppose I thought either there would be one or there wouldn't be one. I'd found out, you know, like what the case was. I didn't think it depended on me. Of course it does, she says. Oh? Yes, heaven is democratic these days, she goes. And then she says, or at least it is if you want it to be. What do you mean democratic? We don't impose heaven on people anymore, she says. We listen to their needs. If they want it, they can have it. If not, not. And then, of course, they get the sort of heaven they want. And what sort do they want on the whole? I asked. Well, they want a continuation of life. That's what we find. But better. Even better than the bloody amazing life they had. Sex, golf, shopping, dinner, meeting famous people, not feeling bad. Okay, I said. Well, what about the old days? She smiled and said, well, that was before my time, of course, but yes, you know, dreams of heaven used to be a lot more ambitious. And hell, too, I asked. What about it? Is there hell? Oh, no, she says. That was just, you know, like propaganda. I was wondering, you know, because I've met Hitler. Oh, yes, lots of people do. He's a sort of tourist site. Really? What did you make of him? No, I didn't meet him, I said. You know, like, who do you think I am? You know, he's a man I wouldn't shake the hand of. You know, I just watched him go by from behind the bushes. Oh, yeah, lots of people prefer to do it that way. So I thought, well, if he's here, then there can't be a hell. Yes, that's a very reasonable deduction, says Margaret. Just out of interest, I say, what does he do all day? I mean, I imagine him going to the 1936 Berlin Olympics every afternoon, I don't know, watching the Germans win everything while Jesse Owens falls over, then, you know, back for some sauerkraut, Wagner, rump with a busty blonde of pure Aryan blood. I mean, I don't know what. I'm afraid we respect people's confidentiality, said Margaret. Naturally. That was right. You know, I wouldn't want everyone knowing what I got up to, come to think of it. So, okay, so there isn't any hell. Well, there's something we call hell, but it's more like a theme park. You know, skeletons popping out, frightening you, branches in your face, stink bombs, that sort of thing. You know, just give you a good old scare. Good old scare. Okay. As opposed to a bad scare. Exactly, she goes, you know. We find that's all people really want nowadays. Do you know about heaven then in the old days? What old heaven? Yes, I mean, you know, I suppose it's in the records. Well, what happened to it? Oh, it's sort of closed down. People didn't really want it anymore. People didn't need it. But I knew a few people who went to church, had their babies christened, didn't use rude words. You know, what about them? Oh, yeah, we've got them. Yeah. They're catered for. You know, they pray, they give thanks. You know, like you play golf and have sex. They seem to enjoy themselves. You know, they got what they wanted. We built them some very nice churches. Okay, so does God exist for them? I asked. Oh, surely. But not for me. It doesn't seem so. Unless you want to change your requirements of heaven. I can't deal with that myself, I'm afraid, Steve. You know, I could refer you. Okay. I've got enough to think about for the moment, Margaret, thank you. Fine, well, until the next time. So, I slept badly that night. My mind wasn't on the sex, even though they all did did their best with that. Was it indigestion? Had I bolted my sturgeon? There was worrying about my health again. Next morning shot a 67 on the golf course. My caddy, Severiano, reacted as if it was, the best round he'd seen me play, as if he didn't know that I could do 20 shots better. Afterwards, I asked for certain directions and drove towards the only visible patch of bad weather that I could see. And as I'd expected, hell was, a great disappointment. The thunderstorm in the car park was probably the best bet. There were out-of-work actors prodding other out-of-work actors with long forks, pushing them into vats labelled boiling oil, phony animals with strap-on plastic beaks pecked at foam rubber corpses. I saw Hitler riding the ghost train with his arm around a mudchen with pigtails. There was bats and creaking coffin lids and the smell of rotting floorboards. Is that what people wanted? Well, anyway, tell me about the old heaven, I said to Margaret the following week. It was much like your accounts of it, she says. I mean, that's the principle of heaven. That you get what you want, what you expect. I know some people imagine it's different, that you get what you deserve. But that's never been the case, Steve. We have to disabuse them. Okay, and are they annoyed when you disabuse them of this concept? Mostly not. People prefer to get what they want rather than what they deserve. Though some of them do get a little irritated that others aren't sufficiently maltreated, But part of their expectations of heaven seem to be that other people should be in hell. Not very Christian, but there you go. And, I don't know, is it all like spirit life and so on? Yeah, that's what lots of people want, at any rate, in certain epochs. Been lots of fluctuations over the centuries about decorporealization. At the moment, for instance, there's quite an emphasis on retaining, as you can see, your own body and your own stupid, idiotic personality, Steve. And this may just prove a phase like any other. What are you smiling for? I asked. I was rather surprised. I thought Margaret was there to just give information like Natalia. Yet she obviously had, her own opinions. Well, only because, this is still Margaret, right? This is my Margaret voice. Because it sometimes seems odd how tenaciously people want to stick with their own bodies. Of course, they occasionally ask for minor surgery, but it's as if, say, a different nose or a tuck in the cheek or a handful of silicone is all that stands between them and their perfect idea of themselves. Okay, so what happened to old heaven? Oh, it survived for a while after the new heavens were built, but there was increasingly little call for it. People seemed keener on the new heavens. It wasn't all that surprising, really. We take the long view here. What happened to the old heaveners? She's shrugging like some corporate planner whose predictions had been borne out to the tiniest decimal point. Well, they died off. Just like that? You mean you closed down their heaven and so they died off? No, not at all. On the contrary, that's not how it works. Constitutionally, there would have been an old heaven for as long as the old heaveners wanted it. Yeah, that's how it goes. Okay, so are there any old heaveners around? I think there are a few left. Can I meet one? They don't take visits, I'm afraid. They used to, but, the new heaveners tended to behave as if they were a freak show, kept pointing, asking silly questions. So, the old heaveners declined to meet them anymore. They gave up speaking to anyone but other old heaveners. And then they began to die off. And now there aren't many left. We have them, tagged, of course. Are they disembodied? Some of them are, some of them, some of them aren't. Depends on the sect. Of course, the ones that are disembodied don't have much trouble avoiding the new heaveners. Well, that made sense. In fact, it all made sense except for the main thing. Okay, so, what do you mean the others died off? Well, everyone has the option to die off if they want to. I never knew that. No. There are bound to be a few surprises. Do you really want to be able to predict it all? And how do they die? Do they kill themselves? Do you kill them? Margaret looked a bit shocked at the crassness of this idea. Goodness, no, she said. As I said, it's democratic nowadays. If you want to die off, you die off. You just have to want to do it for long enough, and that's it. It happens. Death isn't a matter of hazard or gloomy inevitability the way it is the first time round. No, 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 no. We've got, we've got free will sorted out here. Down there's no free will, as you know. But here, come on. I wasn't sure I was taking this all in. I'd have to go away and maybe think about it. Okay, so tell me, I said, these problems I've been having with the golf and the worrying, do other people react like this? Is this normal? Oh, yeah. We get people asking for bad weather, for instance, or for something to go wrong, or, I don't know, for them not being able to get it up when they have sex. They miss things going wrong. Some of them even ask for pain. For pain. Oh, certainly. Well, you were complaining the other day, but not feeling tired. Well, you just want to die. I thought that was an interesting phrase. People ask for pain. It's not so extraordinary. We've had them requesting operations as well. Not just cosmetic ones, real ones. Do they get them? Well, only if they really insist. We try to suggest that wanting an operation, having a leg chopped off or something is really a sign of something else. But normally they agree with us, and some of them don't. And what percentage of people, I said, take up the option to die off? And she looked at me levelly, a glance telling me to be calm. And she said, 100%, of course. Over many thousands of years, calculated by old time, of course. But yes, everyone takes the option sooner or later. So it's just like the first round then. You always die in the end. Yes, except don't forget the quality of life here is much, much better. People die when they decide that they've had enough, not before. The second time round, it's altogether more satisfying because it's willed. She paused and then she said, as I say, we cater for what people want. Well, I wasn't blaming her. I just wanted to find out how the system worked. So even people, religious people who come here to worship God throughout eternity, they end up throwing in the towel after a few years, 100 years, 1,000 years. Oh, yes, certainly, goes Margaret. As I said, there are, still a few old heaveners around, but their numbers are diminishing, all the time. And who asks for the death soonest? I think ask is the wrong word, she said. It's something you want. There aren't any mistakes here. If you want it enough, you die. That's always been the ruling principle. So, well, I'm afraid, to answer your question, that, the people who ask for the death the earliest are a bit like you. People who want an eternity of sex and beer and drugs and fast cars, that sort of thing. They can't believe their good luck at first. And then, a few hundred years later, they can't believe their bad luck. Those become the neurotics, and those are the sort of people also, they realize that they're stuck with being themselves. They're millennium after millennium after millennium after millennium, they're the idiots. They're the idiots, and they tend to die off the soonest. I never take drugs, I said firmly. And I've only got 7 cars. That's not very many around here. I don't even drive them that fast. No, of course not. I was just thinking general categories of gratification. You understand. And who lasts the longest? Well, some of those old heaveners were fairly tenacious customers. Worship kept them going for ages. Nowadays, lawyers last quite well. They love going over their old cases and then, going over somebody else's case. And they can take forever, metaphorically speaking, she added, And scholarly people, they tend to last as long as anyone, really. They're like, sitting around reading all the books, arguing about them, And then some of those YouTubers, some of those people who make those YouTube videos, they love doing all of this till the cows come home, Yeah. What about the people, the people who write books and that kind of thing? Oh, no, the creative people, like purely creative people, no, they don't last half as long as the people who, argue about books. No. It's the same with painters, really, and composers. They somehow know when they've done their best work, and then they... better to, go blah, blah, than to fade away, Yeah, I should have been feeling depressed, but I I wasn't, weirdly enough, you know. Well, you've got what you wanted, said Margaret. And I said, yeah, maybe so, maybe, I don't know, but it's weird to think that I'll get to a point where I want to die. Well, give it time, she said, brisk, friendly, give it time, give it time. By the way, okay, one last question. I could see her, you know, fiddling with her pencil, straightening into a little row. Who exactly are you? Us? Oh, we're remarkably like you. We could be you, in fact. You know, perhaps we are you. I don't know. I'll come back again, if I may, I said. So for the next few centuries, you know, it may have been a bit longer, I don't know, I worked seriously on my golf. And after a while, I was going around in 18 shots every time, and my caddies was truly astonished. And this became routine. You know, and then, of course, I gave up golf. And then I took up tennis, and pretty soon I'd beaten all the greats from the Hall of Fame on shale, clay, grass, wood, concrete, carpet, any surface they chose. So I gave up tennis. I played for Leicester City in the cup final and came away with a winner's medal. You know, my third goal, power header from 12 yards out, clinched the match, obviously. Flattened Rocky Marciano in the fourth round at the Madison Square Gardens, and you know, carried him a bit to the last round or two, and got the marathon record down to 28 minutes. Won the World Darts. My innings of 750 runs in the one-day international against Australia at the Lords won't be surpassed for some time. Enneagram 3. After a while, Olympic gold medals began to feel like, you know, small change. I gave up sport. I went shopping seriously. Ate more creatures than I have ever sailed on Noah's Ark. I drank every fucking beer in the world and then some. I became a freaking wine connoisseur. You can't swear around wine. A tea connoisseur. I dispatched the finest vintages ever out. I met loads of famous people. I had sex with an increasing variety of partners in an increasing variety of ways. But there are, as you know, only so many partners, so many ways. I mean, don't get me wrong, incidentally, I'm not complaining. I enjoyed every bloody minute of it, YouTube. All I'm saying is, I knew what I was doing while I was doing it. I was looking for a way out. I tried combining pleasures and started having sex with famous people. No, I won't tell you who. You know, they asked me to respect their privacy. Beyonce. I even took up reading. I remembered what Margaret said and tried, for a few centuries or so, arguing about books with other people who'd read the same books. But it seemed like, you know, a pretty arid life, at least compared to life itself. I'm also, you know, have a strong Enneagram 7 fix. I even tried joining the people who sang and prayed in church, but that's not really my thing. You know, I only did it because I wanted to cover all the angles before I had what I knew would be my final little talk with Margaret. And of course she looked much as she had done several millennia before we'd first met. But then so did I. Listen, I said, if you get what you want in heaven, then what about wanting to be someone who never gets tired of eternity? And I sat down feeling a little smug. And she, you know, she nodded almost encouragingly. You're welcome to have a go, she said. I could get you the transfer. But I asked, knowing that there would be a but, right? I'll get you the transfer, she said. It's just, you know, it's just a formality. Okay, but what's the but? I didn't want to sound rude. On the other hand, I didn't want to spend several millennia pissing about if I could be saved the time. Well, people have, you know, tried that already, Margaret said in a nice, sympathetic tone, as if she, you know, she really didn't want to hurt my feelings. And what's the problem? What's the but? Well, there seems to be a logical difficulty. You can't become someone else without stopping being who you are. Nobody can bear that. Metaphysically. It's, you know, what we find anyway, she added, you know, half implying that I might be the first person to, you know, crack this problem. Someone who must have been keen on sports like you said that it was changing from being a runner to being a perpetual motion machine. After a while, you simply want to run again. Does that make sense? I nodded. And everyone who's tried it has then asked for a transfer back, is what you're saying? Yes. And afterwards, they all took the option to die off. Yes, they did. And sooner rather than later, in fact. There might still be a few of them around. I could call them in if you want to ask them about it. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I just thought there must be a snag. Yeah. Sorry. No, please don't apologize. I certainly couldn't complain about the way I've been treated, you know. Everyone had been really level with me from the start. I took a deep breath. It seems to me, I went on, that, heavens, a very good idea. It's a perfect idea, you could say, but not for us, not given the way we are. We don't like to influence conclusions, she said. However, I can certainly see your point of view. So what's it all for? Why do we have heaven? Why do we have these dreams of heaven? She didn't seem willing to answer. Perhaps she was being professional. So I pressed her. Go on, give me some ideas. Perhaps because you need them, she said. Because you can't get by without the dream. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It seems quite normal to me. Though I suppose if you knew about heaven beforehand, you might not ask for it. Mm-hmm. Oh, I don't know about that. It had all been very pleasant, the shopping, the golf, the sex, the meeting the famous people, the having sex with the famous people, not feeling bad, the not being dead. I had sex with Jennifer Aniston. Anyway, sorry. After a while, getting what you want all the time is very close to not getting what you want, you know, all the time. The next day, for old time's sake, I played another round of golf. Wasn't at all rusty, 18 holes, 18 strokes, Shazam. Hadn't lost my touch then. I had breakfast for lunch and breakfast for dinner, and I watched my video of Leicester City's 5-4 victory in the Cup final, though it wasn't the same, knowing what happened. Had a cup of hot chocolate with Natalia, who kindly looked in to see me, and later I had sex, only with one woman, of course. And afterwards I sighed and rolled over, knowing that the next morning I would begin to make my decision. And I dreamt that I woke up, my friends. It is the oldest dream of all. And I've just had it. This is Mariam's scented candle that she gave me as a present.